Okay, in this next part, it's called the Romantic Royal Wedding. Now, in this part, um, this is a historical event for the House of Targaryen because never has there ever been a human that has ended up in Daenerys Stormborn of the House of Targaryen's world. And after having proven himself by walking the coals of fire, not only she fell in love with this being from a smaller world than hers, though he be low in stature and with all his human frailties, and as the visionary had told her from the lost pages of time, that she did and truly was in love with him. So, in which case then this would be a historical event to marry one from another world that would lead her to greatness and all the glory that was due to be hers once and for all. So, Daenerys first has a secret meeting about the human's destiny in a meeting room with certain leading knights. One might think of them like generals in the human's standpoint, joint chief of staff of his human world, though it'd be more advanced than hers. And that she is interested in trying something the human had mentioned to her called a honeymoon. It is another human custom that she finds fascinating, and though she would love to do this for a week, she does decided that, well, she can't be away from the palace, um, taking in all this pleasure that the human has brought to her. So perhaps maybe 3 or 4 days will be just as good. But in the meantime, she will bring to the human's attention an opportunity to train those that she had freed so long ago, as long as they meet certain criteria. Like you couldn't be too old, you couldn't be too young, and those that would be freely willing to serve her in a new army that she forms, which of course would now replace the Dothraki that she had tried before, would be a new type of army known as the Dragonsphere Forces. And all the lead knights, who are the main, would be like her joint chiefs of staff in her meeting room, seem to agree on this. But for now, she wants to keep this under wraps and not let William know what her plans are until at the time or after she goes through this human custom called a honeymoon. They all agree to this, and she then has to get ready for the historical Targaryen wedding that is to take place. She also, at the time, when William wanted to enact on a human custom about how a relationship is started, that in the human custom, human male or female would like go on something called a date about 3 or 4 times before they became what is considered girlfriend boyfriend. And if the date went well, then usually at the minimum of 6 months, but at least no longer than a year, then the human male would ask the female to marry him. How she has explained to him um, that in her world they didn't believe in wasting time, and because while men get to propose such traditions of getting married, that she being the queen, it was her choice to choose, not the man's. And if William didn't propose to her, she was going to ask William to marry her anyway. So William feels quite in love with her about this and accepts this, and even tells her that he would have found it very romantic even if she did ask him to marry her, because he would say yes, and she's quite stimulated by his reaction and acceptance of this. So she believes in moving the marriage forward because, after all, as everyone remembers, there are certain priest lords that said she didn't find a suitor or marry, that she could also lose the throne and the Pyramid Palace, but she doesn't reveal this as the reason for her wanting to not wait so long by the human custom in a relationship to get married. So, again, it's not that she's using him, even though she could be perceived that way, but she has her own agenda. And she likes the idea he's so obedient, is as if she takes some type of delight that she has him wrapped around her finger and he's just going to go along with whatever she says. So she's not displeased by how he's just doing whatever it is it takes to please her. She talks to the supreme priest lord, who usually performs wedding ceremonies. And though he be not Targaryen, but he is one of citizen of the Marine, he will be performing the wedding. And she shows all the gifts that he has bared to her, including this crown. Now, if everyone remembers, she already had a crown designed, but at the time when she had invaded King's Landing and had it for about a rough 3 to 6 months until she was getting ready to marry Jon Snow, which she did, and held the throne for 3 days before the great reacted invasion that caused her to not only have her marriage dissolved or uh, annulled, and the fact that she also had to, by force, completely disown any child that would have been born of her and Jon Snow, her nephew, who is a Targaryen, that the crown that she had made at the time when she was forced to leave had to be left behind. So no one ever knows whatever happened to that crown. It could have been destroyed, or like the child she would have had to disown, be demolished and never shown again. But she likes the idea that the crown that the human had made for her come from the love of his heart, and many jewels were on it. Everything was symbolical, because again, symbolism is everything. And so the priest lord approves of everything and even sees that the human may be naive on certain when it comes to the scepter. For not only was a scepter of a dragon made to show her ruling, but the mere fact that the human said, even though I may not be able to go back to my homeworld, and because both of us may never see my world, in representation of the human race, he asks her, with this scepter, would you be the ambassador queen of my homeworld of Earth? Remember, again, she snatched that thing up without hesitation because he, being so naive, she knew that there was power behind this symbolism and laid it across her lap with one head propped by her hand as she's looking down at him while he's on bended knee in front of her with a great smile, because she's knew that by taking this second scepter, it gave her power tenfold, and what queen would resist such a gift of symbolic power? Not anyone, especially a supreme queen, the mother of dragons. So the priest lord sees that everything that the visionary had told her in the past is coming to be fulfilled. With this everything having been done and approved, Daenerys then has a second secret meeting with the priest lord because, out of concern, she knows that there are still those that do not want her to return with many forces, and this time she won't be caught off guard, and she'll remember those who betrayed her and threw her off the throne. So, for his own safety, because he is the symbolic male dragon, to assist the female dragon, which is the mother of dragons, Daenerys Stormborn, though she is stronger in power and symbolically the stronger female dragon, the male dragon would gladly lay his life down before her. And she does love this about him, but she doesn't want him hurt, for he is the greatest treasure that has ever come into her life. So she tells the priest lord that when the time comes of the marriage ceremony, that it would be best in discretion of valor for their world that the mere title Dragonsphere be withheld during the ceremonies, because one never knows whether they're invited or not. If someone would try to use this as leverage for betrayal, like that of what happened between her and Jon Snow. So the priest lord, the supreme one who approved of the crown and all the gifts that was presented to him, and even approval of his crown that represents his heraldry of being a duke, until she removes it and puts the crown that she has designed on his head, is withheld. And so thus the title of Dragonsphere is not going to be mentioned. So again, this is a part that involves the royal wedding between a human of the dark blue star that shines brightly in the Valerian night sky of a world called Earth, and a supreme queen of the House of Targaryen, Daenerys Stormborn. Great will be the symbolism in here. Great will be the history for all of Targaryen to have married a being from another world that shall deliver unto her such great glory and victory. Now, in this final chapter, which is not quite the epilogue, chapter 9, the reception and the great farewell launch, you have to remember that this human has strange devices. And just as it's possible for the woman in red to raise someone from the dead, it is also quite possible for a human to use resources of this world, though it does take him much time, because again, even though it doesn't seem like in the movie that it took very long for them to have a relationship and to eventually become husband and wife, and she approves of his heraldry when he presents it to her, that though tradition would state that the man takes the throne and the woman who would be queen follow in his stead, he agrees to allow her to have the Iron Throne of Swords for the realm of the kingdoms, because in his world, under the heraldry of the McEachran clan, as a duke, based on his heraldry, that his heraldry does not allow him such pleasures of taking a throne, and he can't think of anyone better than someone who he considers to be a goddess, which for her is a strange thing for him to say, because they don't believe in such things. And it is the first time that he's ever called her this. But she could see where he practically almost worships the ground she walks on. She delights in this and adopts under her decree that she shall accept this human custom, that he will, upon being married, follow in her stead, because this is something that she wouldn't allow anyway, and of course then she couldn't marry him, because she does not want him to sit on the throne. She wants it. So it doesn't come out that way to him, because he voluntarily states that he would be glad to follow in her stead, sitting at her right hand. This delights her, this plays right perfectly as to her plans anyway. So everything is going into her plans better than she thought. Once the marriage ceremony is done, there is a great reception. And once the reception is done and more special human customs are introduced to her it's the greatest night ever. But now we get into, as they would say in his world, a little bit of chivalry of Daenerys' world, because you can imagine that having a handmaiden sitting in the same room with Daenerys, as she decides that now that she has a human husband, king, who will sit at the right hand, following in her stead, certain things that came with him are no longer to be used. And what can he do? He can only obey what the queen says, because she cannot show favoritism. So she takes his rucksack and allows him to have his grooming tools, because she appreciates the fact that he wants to keep himself well groomed. And there are certain instances where, though it is considered something they never talk about, the difference between a human and the people of the seven known kingdoms, including herself, talks about such things about how one breathes and filters the air. So it kind of sounds odd, maybe grotesque, but it's because she's trying to relate to him that they never need such tools because they breathe differently. This also defines the difference between humans and the people of her world, including the Targaryen race. So, in any case, um, it is quite the thing, and as before, you can imagine how this human would feel such embarrassment because, again, for them, to name a part of an anatomy such things as the humans do would be considered not normal in her world. And so she holds up, for example, something that is considered to be called human underwear, and she could never figure out why there was a hole in front. And so you can only imagine how embarrassing this poor human is as Missandei's eyes drop open and wide because it just blurs right out. Oh, so this front hole's for your penis and balls. And he's turning 3 shades of red, and she delights in how he's so changing color. And Missandei's mouth drops open, and all she can think is wow. And poor William, again, this naive human, being so modest and not used to the forwardness that the Supreme Queen uh, is with him. Um, she likes how his reactions are to certain topics, and it greatly stimulates and arouses her because of how he reacts to certain things. But she takes everything from the rucksack, including the rucksack, and anything out of the longer bag of this launching device, and says that these are her treasures now, and that he's never to wear these because, as far as she's concerned, he is home and he will be wearing the things that she picks out, the clothes to make him blend in with the people of her world. So she confiscates the last of his underwear and everything and puts them in a special box and tells him, "You're never to get in here. These are mine." You don't argue with her because once she speaks firmly, that is it. So he knows no matter what, he has to obey her command, even as her husband. And he kind of delights in how she gives him these commands, and she senses this because she knows he'll do whatever she asks of him. And again, she feels that this is such a great moment for her, as though she feels like a young queen at the late age of being in her teenage life, that she could have such a man in her world that would do whatever she commands, even in the chambers. She also agrees to help the human with his last oath to his world. He feels that it is a custom and tradition because he knows he can never go back to his world, and this is where he's going to remain with the remainder of days. And so for him, it's like being in heaven. This is where he hopes to perhaps have children with her. And she also is very much looking forward to this. So they go out, and she realizes he's had a little too much time on his hands because this very large thing has certain connection points which he connects cables to, and this special launch buoy that is attached to the launcher itself is connected to something that looks what he calls a rocket. Again, these are strange things, and though she's a bit fearful because though the human of, of his world would be low in stature and have their frailties, it is the technological advance that she's never seen before. They all agree to make a sworn oath never to discuss these things that this human in his of his alien world has brought with him, or the things that he has made. So there is the launching scene of this rocket with all his recordings from his recording device, and he figures that it perhaps one day humans will come to find this device listen to it, and perhaps track down where it came from and visit her world. And she delights in this because she would love to meet other humans. But she also knows that perhaps if William should live as long as she does, because in the next sequel there will be something called Game of Thrones 2, Khaleesi's Dragon Spirit, the Veil of Passing, um, where William almost has a near-death experience and he will live as long as she does. That they together, in much longevity, will probably never see his world, but she accepts this as much as William does because he feels that everything he needs, not her wealth, her fame, or riches, for being a Supreme Queen, he's already rich because she has given him his heart and he has allowed her to have his and possess his soul, as she has quite staked plainly that she has done. So, once the device has been launched, there's two alternate ending scenes. After they lock up the device, make a pact never to discuss it ever again until the right time. They should want to have certain officials that are appointed the task of studying these devices to advance their world. And it is locked up in the same vault where she keeps most of the palace treasures and everything else. So the first alternate scene, of course, would be the making love scene where the camera spans out to the balcony of her chambers and shows the moon's view, and thus would be the ending. But then there's another alternate where, come the next morning, um, William is painting, and of course, she doesn't scold him because, again, that's something that people like artists would do, and likes the picture that he has painted for her of his solar system. And again, he assures her he has no regrets and has no intention of leaving her, and she loves this about him. And he even introduces her with an invitation to sit beside him, and that perhaps, her being a Supreme Queen, she can name the planets of her solar system. She finds this very fascinating, and they will no longer be known as wanderers. So the scene ends as he shows her how to hold a paintbrush and start painting, and she is loving every moment of this, and thus as again the ending of the motion picture. So once this whole thing is done, then there will be an upcoming epilogue about the moral of the story, and that will be covered later. So that's how the whole 9 chapters of Game of Thrones, the motion picture, A New Revelation. 2 dragons united as one, because in Daenerys' world, symbolism is everything. Attention! Don't give up after Series 8. Coming soon, will be the theatrical motion picture Game of Thrones: A New Revelation. In Khaleesi's world, symbolism is everything, and it will be the uniting of two dragons as one.